The new update for Conan Exiles is almost here, and all has been revealed in the dev stream. There's a lot of exciting stuff to cover today, and there's no time to waste, so let's get started with the Age of War Chapter 3. The flagship feature of this update is of course the PvE raid. This was announced ahead of time and is something new that Conan Exiles has not really had before. The real core idea behind this edition is that, in a way, PvE players never really get to experience the fun of besieging bases and blowing stuff up. Just by that sentence alone, which comes straight from Dennis, the lead designer, you kinda know what to expect. You'll find the PvE raid at the newly built Al Moriah. As we've seen hints of in the previous Battle Pass backgrounds, the castle we'll be attacking is an enormous structure of reinforced stone. For all intents and purposes, it seems the same as a player base, in that everything here can be damaged or destroyed. Not only does this finally give some use to raiding tools in PvE, but it also allows for a lot of strategic variety in how you approach this siege. You can straight up just annihilate the walls, you can use explosives to blow a small but clear path through, climb the walls, fly up with a bat demon, and so on. Dennis mentioned that some of the building pieces, like the doors, have had custom adjustments to the health, so you might see them come down faster than you would expect to see compared to default health values. The base will also restore itself once everyone is out of the area and basically not looking at the structure, similar to existing NPC camps, so you won't get locked in by the structure respawning, nor will you have to wait hours to tackle it again. It's worth noting that Dennis said the raid shown on stream was on a different internal build as they had some technical issues earlier in the day, but the actual raid you'll fight on the public beta client and the live servers will be far more difficult and fitting for an army. Dennis also mentioned the land claim of Al Moriah, which some people were concerned about, has either not been changed or has changed very little, so bases close to Al Moriah should be fine. Additionally, it's worth mentioning this on the side, tied into this is the new Battering ram. It's both PvE and PvP, and it's not yet balanced properly, but it will be finalised for launch. The Battering ram on the stream was particularly effective, though the stats are, again, still up for tweaks, and they were being tested against the aforementioned adjusted doors, so they did kind of overperform. For now, Thralls cannot use Battering rams, as Dennis said it feels more dynamic and engaging with finding the correct window of time to use it, as opposed to just throwing it on a Thrall that will absent-mindedly destroy everything. So, back to the siege. The main objectives here are simple: get through the defences, kill the Stygians, loot the treasures. There seems to be three distinct areas of the castle: the outer walls, the inner courtyard, and the main keep. The raid is technically counted as finished when you've killed the enemies inside, including the Stygian commander on the top floor. This raid is targeted towards the upper echelon of players between level 50 and 60, and it can be completed as either a solo or a group, though the difficulty is targeted at 2 players with Thralls, as that seems to be how most people play. This implementation and some of the things Dennis said makes me think that this is more testing the waters for future content using this system. Think of it as kind of an overground dungeon with destruction and flexibility, in a way. I really like this idea, and if it's something they want to do more of in the future, I think it could be really successful. Unfortunately, the raid is not available on the Isle of Siptar. The story events tie this castle to the Exile lands, though Dennis said they did want to put it on Siptar, though it proved quite difficult, but it may happen in the future. This could possibly tie into something I'm going to tell you about later, but we'll get to that in a bit. As for the rewards, it seems pretty fair. Throughout the castle you'll find caches of raid supplies within the walls, and plenty of treasure items around the castle that you can use to bolster your own treasure hoard. Additionally, I believe all the enemies are indeed lootable, so you'll also get enemy loot too. Some people were curious if this is permanent content. The siege is indeed permanent. It's not seasonal and it won't be going away after this chapter. At a glance, I'm a bit concerned about console performance in the savannah given the size of this structure and the destructible elements, but hopefully there's been some optimisation to target that issue. The PvE siege sounds pretty good. I'll admit I was expecting something a little more endgame, but I think I like where it's ended up. The flexibility and destructibility of this encounter is a big plus and does make it feel like you're actually attacking a base, rather than having scripted explosions or just looting keys for doors. Overall, I'm pretty excited to get my hands on this. The siege seems to reward a fair bit of treasure, but you might be thinking that currently there's not a huge amount of reasons to build up your hoard. Well, that's changing with the next new addition, the Tavern System, and I think people are going to love this. The Tavern is designed as your very own adventure hub in your base. To quote Dennis, "Every good adventure starts in a tavern." They want to add more things that make the game feel alive, especially in giving thralls purpose and presence in the world by giving them jobs or roles. The Tavern aims to be a building block of that idea. During purges, you will find the Tavern Keeper Thrall locked up similar to Iskar the Sellsword. They will teach you how to build tavern workbenches. You can then build whatever tavern design you like, place the bench inside as you would a chair or a table, and place the Tavern Keeper inside it to start up operations. This is all base game, but there will be some tavern workbench skins in the Bazaar or Battle Pass, but the Tavern System itself is free to use for everyone. You'll be able to speak with the barkeep to buy things from their inventory or hire NPCs, with the only current NPC being Iskar the Sellsword, the merchant found from the Purge cages. If you pay a lump sum of coins, from which you will have to take those coins from your treasure hoard, he will come to your tavern for a while and offer his services so you can buy things from his stock. This system will be continually updated with new NPCs you can summon. Some of them will be merchants, but Dennis said some things that made me think that perhaps we'll also summon story NPCs this way in the future. Dennis described the barkeeper as the ears of the underworld, and this system seems to just really open the door to so many possibilities. Of course, you can place thralls around your tavern to make it more lively. This is something I'll touch on a bit more later, but the tavern can be populated even more. If you have the tavern counter, a barkeep and some chairs, you can begin luring NPCs to your tavern, which is a new alternative way to get thralls. NPCs will enter the tavern, find a seat and basically hang out there for a while. You'll then be able to talk with them, and if you decide you want them in your ranks, you simply pay them some gold coins and they'll join. Dennis seemed to imply that you could get all tiers of thralls from this system, though he did say that the more valuable thralls will indeed be quite rare and will cost a lot more gold to hire. It wasn't 100% clear if every single NPC that comes in will be hireable or if some of them will just be there for population. Dennis said he's fairly sure that the thralls who visit are clan locked, so random players can't wander into your tavern and hire the thralls that you were looking for. Currently, it sounds like only world thralls can come into the bar, so dancers, fighters, archers, etc., thralls that actually take up space in the world. You can't currently obtain crafter thralls through this method, but you will be able to do so in the future, when the full idea of thralls being part of the world is implemented so that crafters can also roam your base. Going back to something I touched on very briefly earlier, whilst the tavern is a great place to hire NPCs, there's even more. Your own thralls can now be placed onto furniture like benches, chairs, etc. This means that your own thralls can populate the tavern, which is something I've actually seen a lot of people comment about in the past few days. Generally, Conan has always needed some improvement in terms of making the world feel more alive, which is why so many mods serve that purpose. Now some of that functionality is in the base game. Dennis said they did want to add music and chatter, but they didn't quite make that for this update, but it is a very realistic possibility in the future. The tavern seems like at the start of a really good system. The bones are good so far, and it's set up for easy future expansion. This seems like it's going to become one of those core features that players interact with over and over again, and a feature that only grows with time. I'm really excited for this. It'll make your base a lot more immersive with NPCs, but it also adds a really interesting facet of gameplay that I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy. It seems our bases are slowly becoming actual settlements, and I'm all for that. I think this is a really great addition. On that topic of life coming to the world, there are some more changes coming to thralls. Firstly, archer posts are now implemented, so archers will essentially work as human turrets when slotted into a crenellated wall, so they won't try and run around anymore. Generally, any thrall that can stand in the world, like dancers, fighters, etc., can man these posts, as they can with the guard posts from Chapter 2. There's also now a slot for thralls on the burning siege cauldrons, so they will detect when enemies are coming below the cauldron and throw down the burning oil. The cauldrons will damage you if you stand under it, and Dennis mentioned they might be buffing the damage from siege cauldrons as they're not the best at the moment. They touched on again how they want thralls to be really a present part of the world and not just an inventory item. They said something similar last chapter when they mentioned that they wanted thralls to be able to just be placed onto workbenches without actually being slotted into it, so you could actually, customise them. Thralls can also be placed onto furniture using the same green outlines from the guard posts, and that's the system they want to use for manning crafting stations and basically all thrall placement down the road. Only a couple of changes for the thralls this time around, but some really big and meaningful changes, I think. Of course, as with every patch, there were some miscellaneous changes and prospective changes to balancing, which I'll quickly go through now. 9 frames have been added to the start of the spear heavy attack to reduce how effective it is. The devs are currently testing a fix for roll spam, which if successful, will likely ship in the next update after this one. The lock-on camera has also been adjusted. It's now pulled further back and it also looks like a little higher, so you have better spatial awareness. The camera also now adjusts better for inclines, so it should be less cumbersome to use. The new mount is of course a camel. Some people did work this out before. They're currently balanced to be identical to horses, though they're considering increasing the storage space of the camel's inventory from 10 slots to 15 or 20, and camels are not tied to microtransactions, they are also in the base game. There's also some new base game paintings from the previous art competition which have finally made it in. Dennis touched on a really important point here about overpromising. He mentioned specifically clan alliances and fatalities, which is something they've mentioned in previous streams. He basically said these are things that they've overpromised on. Clan alliances are having to go back to the drawing board as the implementation they were looking at before just really wasn't hitting the mark, but Dennis stressed that he really wants and needs to find a way for alliances to fit into the game to make playing together as easy as possible. Fatalities are currently in the works and are nearly complete, however they are being pushed back to likely the next update as they're just not quite ready yet and he doesn't want to ship it without it being ready. There is more Purge content coming, 4 or 5 specialty waves. They're about 95% done, but again Dennis doesn't want to give us something that doesn't work. I presume this includes the stuff I've dug up in previous videos like golems, sorcerers and trebuchets. They also mentioned the down but not out system for thralls so that they don't just, die. It's currently on the roadmap, likely not for the next update but most likely in the next age. The biggest thing mentioned here was that they're adding a 4th chapter. Dennis said that there often isn't enough time in the themed segments with their current schedule. Some updates like the Purge editions, fatalities etc. are pretty much made for the Age of War. Therefore, by adding a 4th chapter to this age, and every age going forward, I think they'll be able to work more on the features they really want in certain ages, without having to make tough decisions between what they want and what they have time to do. A good example of this is the PvE raid on Siptar. It seems like time constraints for that implementation were really quite tight, and that's most likely the reason why it didn't make it to Siptar, even though Siptar has tons of open room for it. Hopefully this move from a 3-age system to a 4-age system will not necessarily lighten the workload, but will make it a bit more flexible so they have time to deliver on the features they really want. So therefore, yes, the Age of War will have a Chapter 4. Of course there was a bunch of Battle Pass and Bazaar bundles and items mentioned. They did show a pre-release version of the Battle Pass, but seeing as so much was mentioned, I think it's most expedient to go through all the bundles and items that were mentioned by the devs. Firstly, 2 new building sets, both of which are expansions. For this chapter we're looking at expansions to the Aesir and the Dungeon sets. I didn't expect to see expansions to these sets, especially not so soon, but I'm not against it. I just hope they're immediately bundled with the original versions of the sets they expand on, as opposed to being sold separately. The Aesir set looks really impressive, and the Dungeon set will include more prison-like items, crypt-style pieces, and finally Conan's first spiral staircase. There's going to be a lot more clan emblems and a lot of emblem-bearing placeables too. As for the rest of the items mentioned, they are as follows: the Numidian Archer bundle, the Vanir Barkeep set, which I think includes a pet bear cub which can nestle inside the Vanir Tavern counter. There's a bundle for a Yamatai Tavern, which I'm very interested to see. There was a Stygian Medicine Tent bundle mentioned, which comes with bandage armour. There was a new elk pet, which is called the Vanir Heart from the Battle Pass, I believe. And also in the Battle Pass was the Savage Soothsayer armour, which is ported over from the Age of Conan. Most bug fixes and adjustments weren't mentioned explicitly on the stream, but they are in the patch notes. Now, there are far too many to go through, but I'll touch on what I think are some of the more important ones. Some items have been moved around in the construction hammer menu, and they've also added new categories for several placeable types. Rough timber foundations have their own section in the hammer, and they've also been fixed to match regular sandstone in terms of health. Fluid presses have been buffed, the recipe for Ica has been halved, and the cost to craft tier 1 furnaces has been reduced to 250 stone. Most equipable items, including legendaries, should now be possible to dismantle. NPCs will now use weapons with some intelligence in terms of combos, and more enemies will now use great axes, short swords, and claws. The following weapons have a new moveset: the Spire, the Reach of the Warrior, Nikosi's Pike, Pike of Prince Craxus, War Spear of the Black Circle, Spear of the Grey Ones, and the Kingslayer Polearm. I'm not sure if this new moveset is in reference to the 9-frame addition to the spear heavy attacks, or whether they just straight up have a new moveset. A few armour issues were fixed, namely a health issue with the Sobek chest piece, and the Turanian bandit helm granting too much stamina. The ability to harvest arms and legs from corpses has been removed. You can still get these items, but there's no more carrying around 50 legs from 3 bodies. They fixed the issues where events were causing crashes, and also fixed an out of bounds in the Kurak dungeon. There are loads of other bug fixes and adjustments, again far too many to list. The link to the patch notes is in the description, and there's a lot of good changes, so I do encourage you to check them out. So, finally, when does this update drop? Well, the public beta client is already out on Steam. However, if you're waiting for the full release, The Age of War Chapter 3 launches December 14th, 2023, so just under a month on the beta client. All things considered, how does this update shape up? Honestly, I think it's really good. The PvE raid sounds pretty fun. I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I will be making some videos on that. I love the idea of the Tavern System, and especially the impassioned speech by Dennis about how this really sows the seeds of adventure. Even more exciting are the future prospects. This is a system designed to be interacted with regularly as a core part of gameplay, not only as a way to call NPCs, but as a primary alternative to thrall breaking. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see quests in the future come from this system, and it will undoubtedly play massively into making the world feel more alive, and I think that when it's more fleshed out and developed, it's going to be an incredible system. And that, my friends, is all the news you need to know from the Age of War Chapter 3 dev stream. Thanks for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. I'll be covering all the new features and additions in the coming weeks, so make sure you subscribe to be the first to get all that juicy info. Again, thank you very much for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.